to Latropeth Language Tutorial 1, Sounds of Latropeth. This one has been done a little bit retrospectively, as it was made after all the other videos that have been uploaded to Conlang W YouTube site so far. I did have an older version on another YouTube channel, which was a classroom style version, and I will upload that one as well here just as a sort of archive piece. But I thought I should make one that is sort of in alignment with the format of the other tutorials thus far. So, Latropeth has 22 sounds, 17 consonants, 5 vowels. Right, what does sound really mean in the context of a language system? So just need to digress a little bit here. It is a bit of an oversimplification to just say sound. So as a native speaker of a particular language, you will have a set of what you perceive to be important sounds in your language that are used contrastively to build up your basic blocks of meaning. For example, p and t. Pin is different to saying tin. In actuality, they usually encompass a bunch of different sounds that are variations that are similar to each other, that differ depending on what sounds they appear next to or close to. And you might say, well, what's the point of knowing that? The point is when you look at another language, you can find that it arranges things differently, and that two of those similar sounds that the native speaker of one language will perceive to be the same sound, the speaker of the other language will be acutely aware of the difference because in their language, those two sounds are used contrastively. So what this is actually indicating is that the idea of a sound is, to some extent, just that, the idea of a sound. The actual perception of a native speaker is something a bit more abstract in terms of sounds in their language than the actual sounds that are coming out of their mouth. In linguistics, they'll separate the two into two disciplines that are interrelated: phonetics and phonology. Phonetics is looking at the sort of physical sounds that are coming out of the speaker of a language's mouth. Phonology looks at how the languages sort of represent the sounds and what's in the mind of the native speaker as important sounds in their language, and it's a little bit more abstract than just saying sound. Okay, I just made an adjustment to the mic output level. I think it was a bit oversensitive, and was listening to the last part and it seemed to be picking up my breathing pattern as well. So hopefully that's fixed itself. So traditionally in linguistics, when they're getting at the physical sounds, they want to represent that. They will have a symbol with square brackets around it. When they're talking about phonemes, sort of languages, how they organize sounds and the native speaker's perception of important sounds in their language, which is phonology, they'll refer to these segments as phonemes, and they will have them with slanty brackets, represented with slanty brackets. Without further ado, let's look at the consonants of Latropeth, the consonant phonemes of Latropeth. These ones are relatively similar to how they are in English. P, t, and k are a little bit different. In English, these tend to be accompanied by a strong puff of breath at the beginning of a syllable. They call that aspiration. In a lot of other languages, it doesn't have that strong puff of breath. You know, pin, paper. So you should try and eliminate it when you're pronouncing them in Latropeth. I probably violate this rule myself, being a speaker of English, but anyway, so here's your examples. Paya, big. Tise, path or way. Kawu, meaning small. Then b and d are very similar to how they are in English. Buha, ant. Dasu. Dasu means tree. I've neglected to actually put the gloss in there and just repeated the word, but dasu actually means tree. My apologies there. So these consonant phonemes are also pretty similar to how they are in English, so we don't have to elaborate very much. F and h. Fubar, chin. By extension, this also means angle, incidentally. Fubar. Suhayis, to stand. Hunuis, to burp. If you've watched the other videos, you'll know that the yis ending appears in sort of your standard form of the verb. So now we're having a look at the nasals and the liquids, as they call them. M, n, and l, very similar to how they are in English again. Mifu, this is a large forest herbivore species. This does not exist on Earth. It does exist, however, in my parallel planet that speaks this language. We have Namu, arm-to-arm drape. This is a cultural artifact of the culture that speaks my language. It's a sort of honorary drape worn mainly by elders. It's like an armband on each upper arm and a drape that goes from two drapes actually that connect the two armbands across the front and sag down a little bit. That's a namu. Lukum, drum. Then we get to the J in slanty lines. This is actually pronounced like the J is in German. So it's more like a Y in English. So don't look at it and say Jane. It's a Jane, which is a juniper berry. And we have a W, which is very similar to English. Wunim is the earth deer god of the Wunim tribe that speak the Wunim tribe dialect, which my videos are instructing on. So now we get to a few phonemes that are a bit trickier. These are quite distinct from what these symbols represent in English. So the first phoneme here that looks like an R, an English R, in my language, this symbol is used to represent a voiceless retroflex plosive consonant that doesn't really exist in English. You could describe it as a sort of a T sound with the tongue curled back. And in here, this word means rock or stone, which begins with that phoneme. Then you have that Q in slanty brackets has no real resemblance to what the Q symbol represents in English. This is actually a voiced retroflex plosive. It's a bit like a D sound with the tongue curled backwards. This word meaning nocturnal insectivore species, a nocturnal insectivore species that does not exist on Earth, like the previous one mentioned. This word is pronounced lehi. So you have to be careful, because if you look at this and say kwehi, you will be off track. Thirdly, we have the X symbol. In Latropeth, it represents a glottal stop. You do find glottal stops in English. If you think of the way that Michael Caine pronounces the word bottle, and he says bottle, but in the middle of it, that is a glottal stop. That's a significant contrastive sound in Latropeth. It's represented, that phoneme is represented in Latropeth with an X. Okay, so don't look at this and say zimu or jimu or something, or eximu or something like that. This is emu. Try and capture that sound in the middle of Michael Caine's pronunciation of bottle, and you'll be on track. And finally, we have a nasal retroflex down the bottom there, represented by the V symbol, totally different to English again. A bit like a N sound with the tongue curl back. This word's pronounced runahes, away from. This is a very common word that you would see a lot. And so now let's move on to the vowels of Latropeth. There are 5 vowel phonemes in Latropeth listed here. The first one, which uses the A symbol, it's a low back vowel and it's like the A in father. Example here, oyim, egg. The second vowel phoneme there represents a sound like E in English, but it's higher up. If you think of the way in a Northern English accent, they pronounce the word wait and say wait. It's the E. That's the sound that's represented by this phoneme, so it should be pronounced E. This word Eku is the storm god in Latropethian culture. Third vowel phoneme. So it represents the sound that in English is represented with a double E, E. So Eku, duck. The fourth vowel phoneme is pretty similar to O in English, as in bold. Orpheme, mother's younger brother. There was a fairly elaborate kinship system in Latropeth, and I am now thinking of simplifying that because I think it got a little bit out of hand, perhaps. So more to come on that later at some point. And finally, the fifth vowel phoneme represented there is like, it's U, basically. So U from father. It's one of the words for father. There's a few. That's the end. Thanks for watching.